started as a joke. Or at least, that's what I told myself when I downloaded Tinder in the dead of night, the faint glow of my phone reflecting off the ceiling. I wasn't looking for anything specific. Maybe a distraction. Maybe some validation. Maybe an answer to a question I didn't even know I was asking. The night was suffocatingly quiet. Too quiet. Emily had gone to bed hours ago, claiming a headache after another awkward dinner filled with tension that neither of us could name. The kids were sound asleep, their doors left ajar just enough for me to hear their soft breathing. But it wasn't the stillness of the house that kept me awake. It was something else. A gnawing itch, a suspicion I couldn't shake. I'd heard people joke about it before at parties and barbecues. Tinder's not just for singles anymore, someone had said with a chuckle, their voice dripping with mockery. Married people use it too. For kicks, for hookups, for whatever. It had stuck with me. The idea of it. The audacity. The danger. And tonight, with my mind refusing to let me sleep, I finally gave in. The setup was almost embarrassingly easy. A fake profile with a random photo of some clean-shaven guy I found online. A fake name. Nothing too flashy, just something generic enough to blend in. I didn't even know why I was doing it, but once I started swiping, it became addictive. Left, left, right, left. A parade of faces, all carefully curated smiles and soulless bios. It was a whole world I didn't belong to, a world I didn't want to belong to. And then, there she was, Emily, my fucking wife. I froze. My thumb hovered mid-swipe as I stared at the screen, my heart hammering in my chest. It was a picture I knew well, one I had taken myself just a few months ago. A family day at the park. She looked radiant, her hair catching the sunlight, her smile carefree in a way that had started to feel rare. And here it was plastered on a dating app. Her profile was simple. Emily, 35. Loves yoga, travel, and deep conversations. Looking for something fun. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Something fun. I hissed to myself, my grip tightening on the phone. The words blurred as anger clouded my vision. Without thinking, I swiped right. A match. My stomach turned. The confirmation hit me like a gut punch. She had swiped right too. She was out here in this digital meat market, while our kids slept down the hall and I worked myself to the bone trying to keep our life intact. I didn't wake her. Not yet. I sat there, staring at her profile, memorizing every detail. Another photo, this one from our beach trip last year. Her bio, playful and casual. Like she was someone free, untethered. It made me sick. Was she bored? Lonely? Or was it something worse? Did she already have someone? How long had this been going on? The questions churned in my head like poison. I wanted to shake her awake, to shove my phone in her face and demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed up all night, seething and plotting. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days that followed felt like a slow boil. I couldn't look at Emily the same way. Every glance, every smile, every word out of her mouth seemed tainted. But I didn't let her see it. Not yet. Instead, I bided my time building the perfect trap. I kept messaging her. Under my fake profile, of course. Hey, Emily. You've got the kind of smile that makes it hard to swipe left. Her response came quickly, almost too quickly. Haha. Thank you. And you're not so bad yourself. Not bad? That was rich. My chest tightened as I typed out another response, my hands shaking with barely contained anger. So, what's a beautiful woman like you doing on here? Surely you're taken. I stared at the screen, waiting. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd hesitate, reconsider, log off and pretend this whole thing hadn't happened. But she didn't. It's complicated. Complicated? My fucking wife. My partner. My in sickness and in health. Complicated? I clenched my teeth and forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't about blowing up now. This was about seeing how far she'd go. Sounds like you could use some uncomplicated fun. What do you think? Her reply took a few minutes this time, but it came. Maybe. I'm just not sure if I'm ready. Not ready? I'd spent years trying to make her happy, and she wasn't ready for this random asshole she'd met online? The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. Still, I pressed on, keeping my tone playful, confident. Fair enough. But I'll be here when you are. The messages continued over the next few days. I poured on the charm, compliments and flattery spilling out of me like venom, and she soaked it up. She laughed at my jokes, told me about her day, even shared little details she hadn't told me in years. Every time her phone buzzed with my fake profile's messages, I'd watch her face light up, her lips curl into a secret smile. It made me want to throw my phone through the wall. Then I decided to push her. I'd love to see more of you. I wrote one night, my hands shaking. Send me a picture. Something just for me. Her response was instant. I don't think I'm ready for that. Yet. I replied, my pulse racing. That's not a no. Just when you're comfortable. You're worth the wait. She didn't answer right away, and for a moment I wondered if I'd pushed too hard. But then the typing bubble appeared. You're sweet. I'll think about it. Sweet. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to grab her phone out of her hands and smash it right then and there. But I didn't. This wasn't the end game. Not yet. I needed her to meet me, face to face. And when she did, there wouldn't be any hiding.
No excuses.
Just the brutal, ugly truth. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't have to wait long for the perfect opportunity to push Emily further. The messages had escalated. She'd grown comfortable, even bold in her replies, and now it was time to see if she'd take the bait. I can't stop thinking about you, I typed late one evening. The way you smile, the way you talk. I need to see you. She hesitated this time, her reply taking longer than usual. When it came, my stomach tightened. I don't know. Meeting feels risky. I get it, I responded smoothly. But imagine this. A quiet park, no expectations, just two people talking. No one has to know. Typing bubble. Pause. Typing bubble again. Okay, but only for a little while. Got her. I picked a park on the edge of town. Far enough to avoid anyone we might know, but not so far that it would seem suspicious. I arrived early, parking my car where I could see the entrance. My heart pounded as I waited, adrenaline coursing through me like a drug. This was it. No more hiding. No more pretending. When her car pulled into the lot, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. She stepped out, wearing that familiar smile, the one that used to make my world stop. Now it just made my blood boil. She glanced around nervously, clutching her phone as she walked toward the bench I'd mentioned in my message. I waited until she sat down, until she started scanning the park for her mysterious admirer. Then I stepped out from behind a nearby tree and walked toward her. Her head snapped up, confusion flashing across her face before the realization hit. Greg? She stammered, her voice a mix of shock and guilt. Surprised to see me? I said, my tone dripping with venom. She stood quickly, her cheeks flushing red. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? I barked, my voice rising. I could ask you the same damn question, Emily. What the hell are you doing here? I can explain, she stammered, taking a step back. Oh, I'd love to hear it. I snapped, my fists clenching. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife was about to meet some random guy she's been flirting with online. Tell me I'm wrong, Emily. Tell me. Her face twisted, anger replacing her guilt. You set me up? She hissed. You invaded my privacy? You stalked me? I stepped closer, my jaw tightening. Don't you dare turn this on me. You're the one sneaking around, swiping on Tinder while our kids are asleep down the hall. You want to talk about betrayal? Look in the goddamn mirror. She slapped me, hard. The sound cracked through the air like a gunshot, and for a moment, everything went still. How dare you? She spat, her chest heaving. You don't get to judge me. You don't know what it's like. To feel invisible. To feel like nothing. Invisible. I laughed bitterly, rubbing my stinging cheek. Oh, that's rich, Emily. You think sneaking around behind my back makes you feel seen? You think lying to me, lying to our family, fixes anything? At least I was honest about what I needed. she screamed. Unlike you, pretending everything's fine while you shut me out, night after night. Don't you dare play the victim here, I growled, my voice shaking with rage. You're the one who cheated. You're the one who threw us away. And you're the one who pushed me to it. She shot back, her eyes blazing. You think you're so perfect, Greg? You're a control freak. A cold, selfish asshole who doesn't even see me anymore. The argument escalated, voices rising, accusations flying like daggers. At some point, she shoved me, and I grabbed her wrist, yanking her phone out of her hand. She screamed, lunging for it, but I held it out of reach. You want to talk about secrets? I sneered, unlocking the screen. Let's see just how complicated your life really is. Her eyes widened in panic as I opened the Tinder app. What I saw made my stomach drop. Profiles, chats, matches, names, dates, conversations. She'd been at this for months. Years, maybe. Jesus Christ, I muttered, scrolling through the messages. How many? She didn't answer, tears streaming down her face. How many? I demanded. 5, she whispered. 5 in a year. Something inside me snapped. I threw the phone to the ground, the screen shattering on impact. She gasped, but I didn't care. My world had already shattered. We're done, I said coldly, turning and walking away. Her sobs echoed behind me, but I didn't look back. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The drive home felt like a blur, the rage and disbelief clouding my vision. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were trembling, and my chest felt like it might explode. I had to know everything, every last detail. Emily came in minutes later, her face pale and streaked with tears. She stood in the doorway, staring at me like a cornered animal. Greg, please, she started, her voice shaking. Don't, I snapped, pointing a finger at her. Just don't. Sit down. She hesitated, then sank into the chair at the kitchen table, her hands fidgeting nervously. I grabbed her phone from the counter where I'd tossed it, the cracked screen mocking me as I turned it on. You've been at this for a year? I growled, scrolling through the app. 5 different men? 5. She opened her mouth to speak, but I slammed my hand on the table, making her flinch. Don't lie to me, Emily. Not now. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's true. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I gritted my teeth, trying to keep my composure as I scrolled through her conversations. Each one felt like another knife in my back. Sweet nothings, flirtatious banter, and worse, plans. Plans to meet. Plans she had followed through on. So what? Was this just fun for you? I spat. While I was breaking my back for this family, you were, what? Out with them? Bringing them into my house? No, she cried, shaking her head. Never here. I would never do that. Oh, well, that's a fucking relief, I snarled. You didn't bring them here. Guess I should thank you for your restraint. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Why, Emily? I demanded, my voice breaking despite my efforts to hold it together. Why wasn't I enough? She looked up at me, her face twisted with anguish. I don't know. I don't know, Greg. I felt lost, invisible, like I wasn't even a person anymore. I needed to feel wanted. Wanted? I barked out a bitter laugh. You've got a husband who's been here for you every damn day, who's done everything he could to give you a good life. But that wasn't enough? You had to go looking for validation from strangers. You don't understand, she said weakly. You're right, I shot back. I don't, and I never will. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by her quiet sobs. My mind raced with everything I'd read. Every image now burned into my brain. There was no coming back from this. No fixing it. I'm filing for divorce, I said finally, the words cold and final. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face contorted in shock. What? No. Greg, please. Don't do this. We can fix it. We can go to counseling. Anything. Just don't do this. Fix it. I said bitterly. You think this can be fixed? You've been lying to me for a year, Emily. A year. You've been sleeping with other men while God, I can't even look at you. Greg, please, she begged, standing and reaching for me. I stepped back, shaking my head. It's over, I said, my voice hard. You can keep the house. I'll find a place. But the kids stay with me half the time. I'm not giving up on them. Her face crumpled as she sank back into the chair. You can't do this, she whispered. Watch me, I said, grabbing my keys and heading for the door. As I walked out, her sobs followed me, echoing through the house like a haunting refrain. But I didn't look back. This wasn't over. Not yet. The divorce was swift and brutal. Neither of us had the energy to drag it out. My lawyer had warned me that things could get messy, especially with the kids involved, but Emily and I both knew there was no saving what we destroyed. The court divided everything equally. The house, the money, the time with our children. It was clean, efficient, surgical. But it didn't make it any less painful. The final hearing felt like a formality. Emily sat across from me, her face drawn and pale, eyes rimmed red from tears. She looked like a shadow of the woman I once knew. But I couldn't find it in me to care anymore. She had screamed at me during the mediation, calling me names that echoed in my head long after the meetings ended. You're a cold, impotent asshole. She had spat at one point, her voice venomous. No wonder I had to go looking elsewhere. Her words stung, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. I'd learned to steel myself, to let her anger roll off me like water off a stone. She wanted a fight. I wouldn't give it to her. In the end, the judge's ruling was clear. We'd share custody of the kids, 1 week with me, 1 week with her. The house would stay in her name, but I'd get half its value in the settlement. It was fair, I supposed, but fairness didn't erase the bitterness that lingered in the air. The first week without my kids was the hardest. The silence in the house was suffocating. Their laughter, their little arguments, the sound of their feet running down the hallway. All of it was gone, leaving behind an emptiness I didn't know how to fill. I threw myself into work, into fixing up the small apartment I'd rented nearby, anything to keep my mind off the gaping hole where my family used to be. Emily's life, from what I could gather, wasn't much better. The few times we had to interact, picking up the kids, dropping them off, she looked tired, broken. Whatever satisfaction she thought she'd find in her escapades clearly hadn't materialized. I couldn't bring myself to feel pity for her, though. She'd made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. The kids, bless them, were the only bright spot in the chaos. They adjusted better than I expected, though I could see the confusion in their eyes. Ryan, my eldest, started asking questions one day as we worked on his science project together. Dad, why don't you and Mom live together anymore? He asked, his voice hesitant. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I said. Big mistakes. And when that happens, it's hard to stay together. But it doesn't mean we don't love you and Chloe. That will never change. He nodded, but the furrow in his brow told me he wasn't entirely satisfied with my answer. How could he be? He was just a kid, trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly shifted beneath his feet. The years passed slowly, and the wounds began to heal, or at least scar over. Emily and I became something like business partners, managing the logistics of parenting with as little personal interaction as possible. We spoke when we had to, kept it civil for the kids, but there was no warmth between us. Only the cold, hard reality of what we'd become. Every once in a while, though, something would happen that reminded me of the family we used to be. A school play, a soccer game, a parent-teacher conference. Moments where we both had to show up, side by side, for Ryan and Chloe. In those moments, we'd exchange the briefest of glances, an unspoken acknowledgement of the bond that would always tie us together, no matter how much we hated each other. One night, years later, as I sat on the porch of my small, quiet home, Chloe called me out to look at the stars. She'd always been the dreamer, the artist, the one who saw beauty in the simplest things. I followed her outside, and we lay on the grass, staring up at the vast, endless sky. Do you think we'll always be a family? She asked, her voice soft. Of course we will, I said without hesitation. We might not all live in the same house anymore, but we'll always be a family. She smiled, her little hand reaching for mine. In that moment, I realized she was right. Despite everything, despite the lies, the betrayal, the anger, and the pain, we were still a family. Not the same family we once were, but a family nonetheless. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.